Infernus squads specialise in close assault, purging swathes of enemy ranks with their pyroblasters. We'll be showing you how to paint an Ultramarines Infernus Marine quickly and easily, and by following this guide, you'll be able to get the whole unit painted in no time. If you're new to painting, you can check out the Citadel Colour Painting Essentials videos to learn more about it. The paints we've used in this guide are listed on screen now. Remember, we're painting in the colours of the Ultramarines, but you're free to paint your miniatures however you prefer. Also on screen now is any additional equipment we've used, but again, feel free to use whichever brushes you're most comfortable with, and if you don't have mediums at home, you can use water instead. So to start off this guide, we've undercoated this model in Macragge Blue. This will give us a great head start when we're painting that armour. It's also a good idea to make sure you've got a pot of Macragge Blue to hand. This will help us tidy up any mistakes later down the line. So the first thing we're going to do is use Abaddon Black to paint the undersuit and some areas of the gun. This is a base paint, so we need to thin it down with some water and apply it to the miniature with a couple of thin layers. Doing this avoids clogging up any of that awesome detail we can see on the miniature. We're using a medium layer brush here. This works really well because it's small enough to get into those details, but also a little bit larger to allow us to paint more quickly. Now in this video, we're only painting one miniature, but these do come in a unit, and you might prefer to paint them all at once. This is called batch painting, and all it means is that we paint more than one miniature at once. So for example, I'd do all of the Abaddon Black on all the miniatures in the batch I'm painting, and then move on to the next stage. Doing this means that we get a larger amount of miniatures painted much quicker. It's up to you how many you paint in a batch. You might like to do 2, or you might like to do the entire unit. It's whatever works best for you. But don't worry, if you make any mistakes, that's why we've got the Macragge Blue. We'll thin that down and just use that to tidy up any mistakes. Now we're going to use Wraithbone just to paint any parchment on the miniature. This is probably quite a small area, but make sure to thin it down and apply a few layers. Don't forget to allow each layer to dry fully before you move on to the next one. Now we're going to use Mephiston Red to pick out the eye lenses and any Purity Seal wax as well. You might find it easier to use a smaller brush here, so we're using a small layer brush. This will just give us a little bit more control of the paint. Again, be as neat as you can, but don't worry, you can always tidy up with the previous colours. This is a nice bright red and it will stand out really well on the miniature. Painting eye lenses can be quite tricky as they're really intricate details, so just make sure you've got a really stable painting position, and it might even help to hold your breath if you're able while you're painting that area too. Now we can see that these miniatures have got lots of straps and leather pouches on them. For these we're going to paint them using Mournfang Brown. This is a nice warm brown which will look really great once we've washed it with Agrax Earthshade later on. Just take your time and work your way around the miniature, again thinning that paint down and building it up in multiple layers. And with all those base coats done, we're now going to move on to the metallics, starting off with Leadbelcher for the silver areas. Again, this is a base paint, so we need to thin it down and apply a few layers. Just be careful to make sure you don't thin it too much, as we don't want that paint to be too watery. If you're ever unsure which areas to pick out in certain colours, you can refer back to the box art or feel free to just choose for yourself. There are quite a few silver areas on the miniature, so this will take a little bit of time, but don't worry, it's well worth the effort. Now we're going to paint that iconic gold using Retributor armour. So we'll be painting the chest eagle and the trim in this colour. Again, it'll take a couple of layers to get a full coverage over that undercoat. Later on, we'll be adding a wash over this gold, and it's going to really add some depth and tie the whole miniature together. Now you can see we've just got a couple of areas left unpainted, and we'll be using Balthazar Gold to pick these out. This gold will work really nicely just to break up all those metallics and add something different to the miniature. And again, we'll be applying Agrax Earthshade to this too. And once you've finished doing that, all our base coats are done and we can move on to the next stages. So for our first shade, we're going to be using Agrax Earthshade, and we'll be using this in a couple of different ways. Firstly, we'll be taking it straight from the pot and we'll be applying this over any brown details and the gold, as well as the wax on the Purity Seal. When you're applying a shade, just be careful not to overload your brush and make sure that there's not too much paint on the miniature. If you find it is pooling in any of the recesses, just clean off your brush and use that to soak up any excess. And next, we'll be thinning it down with some Lamia Medium. So that will be 1 part Lamia Medium to 1 part Agrax Airshade. And we'll be applying this over the parchment. The reason for doing this is so that the shade is more subtle and doesn't overpower that nice Wraithbone base coat. And now you can see how applying Agrax Airshade to a variety of areas really ties everything together and adds lots of depth and interest to the model. Now we're going to use Basilicanum Grey and Contrast Medium, and again we'll be using this in a few different ways. Firstly, we'll start off with the silver areas, and for these we'll use 1 part Contrast Medium to 1 part Basilicanum Grey. Then we'll carefully apply this over all those silver details, and this will add lots of depth and grime to the miniature too. We'll also be applying this into the eye lenses. Just be careful not to get any on the surrounding area, but don't worry, you can always tidy up any mistakes with some thinned down Macragge Blue. Just like the shade, if you find that it is pooling too much anywhere, just clean off your brush and use that to soak up the excess. And next, we're going to use it as a recess shade for the armour. A recess shade just means applying a shade directly into the recesses rather than all over the flat panel. Doing this avoids tinting those flat panels and ensures that we just get that depth in the recesses where we want it. Now you might notice that Basilicanum Grey is a contrast paint, so it might seem a little odd that we're using this for this purpose. However, it's a really strong dark colour and we can use it in lots of different ways to achieve lots of different effects. Take your time and work your way around the miniature, making sure to get as many of those lines in there as possible. And again, if you do accidentally get any on any other areas, just take some of the previous colours and tidy back up. Using a paint in a variety of ways like this is a really great way to get as much out of each paint as possible. Now your Infernus Marine is more than ready to burn down those heretics, and you can absolutely stop painting here. However, if you'd like to see a quick and easy way to take this paint job up a notch, stick with us. So the next thing we're going to do is use 3 shades to achieve a really quick and easy muzzle burn effect. Now the idea of blending 3 shades together might seem a little bit intimidating, but trust us, it's really not as hard as it looks, and it's a great and easy way to make your miniatures stand out on the gaming table. So the first thing we're going to do is start off with Drakenhof Nightshade. We'll be applying this to the end of the weapon. So the first thing we're going to do is take Drakenhof Nightshade straight from the pot and apply this to the end of the muzzle. You'll see straight away that this gives a really cool blue tone to the silver. Then, while the paint is still wet, we'll take some Druchii Violet and do the same thing again, just further down the muzzle. Now we do this while the paints are still wet, so that we can use our brush to dab onto the areas and merge the 2 paints together. This creates a blend really easily. Then, while the Druchii Violet is still wet, we're going to do the same thing with Seraphim Sepia. This will be on the other end of the muzzle. Again, merge those 2 colours together and you'll see we get a really cool gradient muzzle burn effect on the miniature. This achieves a really nice gradient going from the blue to the purple to the sepia, and this is reminiscent of a real muzzle burn effect. And the final thing we're going to do is apply an edge highlight of Calgar Blue to the power armour. We're using a small layer brush for this to give us more control when we're painting. Now the key with edge highlighting is making sure that you've thinned down your paint enough that it glides off the brush easily, but not too much so that it's watery on the palette. We don't want the paint to separate when we apply it to the miniature. It's really up to you how much or how little highlighting you want to do. If you've got a whole army to paint, you might not want to edge highlight every single part of every Space Marine. So in this case, just work your way around the miniature, picking out the more prominent areas like the backpack, the helmet and the knee pads. Where you can, use the edge of your brush to do the highlight for you. Doing this is a really quick and easy way to get a very clean highlight. But don't worry if you do make any mistakes anywhere, just tidy back up with some Macragge Blue. Just remember to thin it down first. And with that, the Infernus Marine is finished, ready to send jets of burning promethium into enemy lines. These techniques will work on the entire unit, so before you know it, you'll have a full force ready for the gaming table. And now you can see that we've also applied transfers to this miniature and we've based it too. We've based it using a technical paint called Armageddon Dust. And if you'd like to learn more about technical paints, you can check out our video all about them. For more tutorials, tips and tricks, you can head to your local Warhammer store where our amazing staff will be more than happy to help. Or head on over to citadelcolor.com. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the video and we'll see you next time. Bye!